Alaska has so much to see, we had to cruise there twice. Some things are better second time, but others not as nice. Stay tuned and we'll tell you which ones we like the best. Welcome back to My Travel Window, where we try and help you see as much of the world as you can while you can. Stay to the end and see the story behind this photo that I took from a plane overlooking Denali National Park. First, a big thank you to everybody who watched and commented on the last video. I've been at this for about 6 months now. I've produced 36 videos. I try and do one every week, and this last video was viewed by and commented on more than the first 35 videos put together. So I appreciate the interest and thank you very much, and I will try not to disappoint with this. In today's video, I want to compare our just completed Alaska cruise with the first one that we did 13 years ago. On the surface level, both cruises were very similar. Same cruise line, Princess. Similar ships, although the first one was smaller. Same length, 7 days. We had the same major Alaska stops, Skagway, Juneau, Ketchikan. It was in the same month, and the weather was very similar, mostly cool, but not as rainy as anticipated. In both cases, we were traveling with other extended family. But in every other way, the two cruises were entirely different. The first cruise was a one-way trip from Vancouver, Canada to Juneau, Alaska, actually to Whittier, or a train to Juneau. The second was a round trip from Seattle and back. So inside cabins on the first trip, shared balconies on the second trip. Completely different excursions on the two trips. We didn't do anything the same. We had a huge change in the formality on the ship and in the mix of passengers. And all of this led in the end to an entirely different experience and feel, in addition to that caused by COVID issues. We chose the initial one-way itinerary based on the fact that I wanted to revisit Anchorage. We brought some family with us because we had a small windfall that allowed us to do so. The small part of that sentence is what also led us to select inside cabins. We chose Princess because it was the only cruise line at the time with which we had any experience. On the second trip, we were looking to take a shared trip but avoid air travel. And that in part helped us to be able to have balconies while we traveled. Princess had done right by us. We knew it would work with the family, so that was the easy choice. So, with all that said, let's compare these trips side by side so that you can benefit from our experience and make your own choices about what's best for you in Alaska. For those of you who have already gone, I would really appreciate also if you put your comments below as to whether you agree or disagree with what we did on excursions and how I rate them and other ideas. That would be really helpful. Number one, the ships. In 2009, we sailed on the Sapphire Princess, which is what they called at the time the Grand class. It had a capacity of 2,670. It was 5 years old at the time. So it's still sailing, being last refurbished in 2018. In 2022, we took the Discovery Princess, a Royal class ship that carries 1,000 more passengers. It was only 3 months into its inaugural sailing season. Despite the difference in size and age, the two ships are strikingly similar. Built around a central atrium or piazza and with very similar locations and amenities. Most of the restaurants are the same, although the main dining room has been broken into 3 smaller dining rooms. I personally prefer the smaller size of the Sapphire, but I'm in awe of the technology updates and the sparkle of the new Discovery. Which one would I pick? I'd call it a draw. The itineraries. As you can see from the map, the round-trip tour is much more compact. So even though there's the same number of Alaska port stops, actually you see much less variety. The round trip suffers most in 2 areas. First is the ridiculously short trip into Victoria, BC late at night in order to satisfy the Canadian port requirement. and the second is the glacier observations from the ship. By contrast, the one-way starts in Vancouver, affording you time to spend as much time or little in a Canadian port as you wish, and while the round trip features the lesser glacier experience, traveling up Endicott Arm on the same day you visit Juneau, the one-way trip actually goes into Glacier Bay National Park. And because of the extra time that they have, not having to turn around and sail back, they can afford to devote a whole day to Juneau and a second whole day to the glacier experience and to cruising in this more majestic environment. Of course, the one-way trip has much more complicated travel and associated travel expense. My pick, take the one-way if you can swing it, enjoy a great experience if you can't. Number 3, cabins. Alaska, even in summer, is cold and often rainy along the route. So recognize that you may not use the balcony as often as you might in some other locales. On the other hand, our traveling companions on the first trip said they didn't want to get off the ship at all after 7 days, except for one thing, the chance to escape a claustrophobic inside cabin. Worth it. Balconies, especially shared balconies. 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. Number 4, excursions. I want to break excursions down for each of the 3 Alaska stops. Here's what I would really appreciate is if in comments people tell me what they think of what we did and what they liked better. Number 1, Ketchikan. On our first trip, we did the Lumberjack Show. On the second trip, we didn't book an excursion in Ketchikan. One member of our group was particularly interested in totems, and we discovered that there's a major totem pole parks, one on each side of town, a little bit outside of town. And there's also a spot where you can see eagles and, on occasion, bears. Second stop, Juneau. On both trips, this was everyone's favorite stop. On the one-way trip, we explored the town on our own. The first thing we did was we took the tram to the top of the mountain, overlooking the town and the harbor with the cruise ships in it. One of our favorite overall pictures of the whole trip. Then we explored the town. We had a rollicking good time in the Red Dog Saloon. And we had a good lunch, enjoyed the music, enjoyed the sawdust on the floor, and it was just a great experience. Then we were probably the only people on the entire cruise ship who went to the state capitol building and asked for a tour. The Capitol was a territorial office building before it became the state capitol, and it's generally considered the least attractive capitol building in the country. But it was a good day, and found some interns to come and give us a tour, and it was quite interesting. On the second trip in 2022, we decided to take the whale watching tour, which consumed almost the entire time that we were in the port of Juneau because it's abbreviated on the round trip. There we go. But it was a fantastic day. 5 stars. Very highly recommended. If I could only pick one excursion for the entire trip, my favorite of all the ones we did, either time, it would be this one. There are other exciting tours, including helicopter tours to Mendenhall Glacier, which was a little pricey for our budget. But if you can't find something really exciting to do or see in Juneau, you just aren't looking. It was a fun town. Skagway. On the one-way, we decided that we were going to take a bus tour to a dog sled summer camp. The trip was long, it was bumpy enough that some in our group got almost carsick, but we visited the dogs, which are they're in a large open area, each attached to his own little doghouse. We heard an educational talk, we had the opportunity to hold puppies, we took a fairly wild sled dog ride, and a wheeled cart. It was fun, but the distance away causes me to downgrade this excursion to 3 stars. It is a long way to go for a fairly short experience. On the round trip, we were all set to take the Yukon Railway Tour, which is one of the highest rated tours in the entire cruise catalog. Unfortunately, the untimely rock slide at the port that morning scuttled many excursions, including ours, because we were in the morning run of the train. Everyone that we talked to who went on the afternoon trip or who had been on the trade ride before said it was excellent. Glacier Bay. As I mentioned, we were unable to cruise Endicott Arm in our most recent trip. We got a little ways up there. We saw some pretty hillside country, some ice floating in the water, and the Arm from a distance, but didn't go there. But even if we had, a couple of hours in a secondary fjord does not match the sights of Glacier Bay National Park, which you're going to see here in these few pictures. Princess is one of the few megaship companies that tours this area. A few pictures here will likely convince you it is worth the trip. One thing I will say is that the best viewing places on Princess tend to be on the bow of the ship, which can be kind of cold in Glacier Bay. Number 5, the passenger mix. Our one-way cruise in 2009 differed considerably in mix from our 2022 cruise. The latter cruise was much younger demographic, had a lot of multi-generational families traveling together, whereas the other trip skewed a lot older. This last trip was also way more casual. In 2009, I wore a tux and I felt right at home. In 2022, it was almost impossible to tell the difference between formal night and casual night, with only a smattering of people dressed elegantly. But the question is this a difference in the 2 tours, or is it a difference of the 13 years makes? And it's definitely the latter. My verdict. When asked for what her favorite cruise is, our travel agent answers, the one I'm on. That's true with our Alaska cruises. We loved them both. We would do them in a heartbeat. Each one was our favorite when we were on it. Best would be defined by the situation. Those 2 cruises were best for us at the time. The first one was best for that time. The second was best for that time. Here's the story behind this picture. At the end of our cruise, we stayed a couple days longer in Anchorage before flying home. Our final day, the weather was spectacular. On a whim, at the spur of the moment, we decided to see if we could get a private plane tour to Denali. To our amazement, they were not all booked. This impulsive move resulted in one of the most memorable days of our lives. The trip turned out to be just the 3 of us in the plane, my wife, me, and the pilot. The picture you see here is a camp where climbers could stop on the way up the mountain. And you see the trail in the picture. If you ever have a chance to do this, and particularly if it's a day with good weather, take it. In the comments, I'd love to hear your Alaska stories. Ours include glaciers, mountains, whales, bears, eagles, totems, dog sleds, trains, rock slides, music, laughter, sunburns, and all of this in a context of being wined and dined and entertained on a beautiful city at sea. What's not to like? Next time, I'm going to contrast our 3 North American cruising destinations: Alaska in the summer, Mexico at Christmas, New England during fall colors. Until then, safe travels.